back to Narrow Path Doctrine. My name is Jim. Been wanting to do a video on this individual for quite some time. I've seen quite a few videos of his, also a lot of videos against what he says and debates, that sort of thing. His name is Leighton Flowers, and his channel is called Soteriology 101. He says he used to be a Calvinist. I don't think so. He doesn't seem to really understand Reformed doctrine. At least he doesn't have a very good understanding of it. I want to play this one clip from him. It's only 59 seconds. We will listen to the entire thing, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of do point by point, and I'll play it again as we go through each part of this clip. So let's have a listen, first of all, here to what Leighton has to say.
Calvinists have the same vocabulary but a different dictionary. They will say things like, we believe God is sovereign, and we'll go, well, of course, God is sovereign. Yeah, we agree with that. But they define sovereignty differently than most of us would define sovereignty. They define sovereignty as more of a deterministic, or that he's micromanaging all the world's decisions and actions of every single creature. And we would define sovereignty as it's defined in every dictionary. He's the king, and he has the right to rule however he pleases. But if he's pleased to give the earth over to man, as the scripture says, and to allow us to make choices that are real and sourced from us, not from his decree or from his determination, then he has every right to do that. So we actually have a higher view of sovereignty in the sense that we believe God could, if he wanted to, give us libertarian free will. And we believe that's exactly what he did according to what the scripture reveals about how he interacts with creation. Calvinist, on the other hand, believes that he's chosen to sovereignly rule a determined world, a world where he makes the choices about what people choose.
All right, so now that you've seen the entire video, let's go piece by piece through this video. Here is the first portion that we'll address.
Calvinists have the same vocabulary but a different dictionary.
This is a rhetorical move, not an argument at all. It assumes the conclusion at the outset, and that's what Leighton does an awful lot in his arguments. The issue is not that Calvinists redefined words arbitrarily, but that we refuse to let modern philosophical categories define biblical terms. Scripture defines sovereignty by what God actually does, not by abstract possibilities of what he could do. The Bible never defines sovereignty as mere right without exercise. God's kingship is not theoretical. It is an active, effectual, and exhaustive sovereignty. Psalm 115:3 says, "But our God is in the heavens, he hath done whatsoever he hath pleased." Sovereignty in Scripture is not God having permission to rule, it is God actually ruling.
They will say things like, we believe God is sovereign, and we'll go, well, of course, God is sovereign. Yeah, we agree with that.
Disagreement is superficial. Everyone says sovereign. I've heard it over and over and over again, but the disagreement emerges immediately when Scripture explains what that sovereignty entails. The moment God's will becomes resistible, contingent, or dependent on creaturely autonomy or free will, biblical sovereignty has already been abandoned. Daniel 4:35 says, "And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say unto him, What doest thou?" Notice, among the inhabitants of the earth, not merely over them in principle.
But they define sovereignty differently than most of us would define sovereignty. They define sovereignty as more of a deterministic, or that he's micromanaging all the world's decisions and actions of every single creature.
Yeah, this is a straw man, actually. Scripture never uses the language of micromanagement, nor do Reformed theologians. That phrase is designed to emotionally discredit providence by making it sound petty or mechanical, and that is an argument that Leighton likes to use quite a bit in his videos. The Bible speaks instead of purpose, counsel, and will, not chaos, not reaction, and not divine guesswork. Ephesians 1:11 says, "In whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated according to the purpose of him who worketh all things after the counsel of his own will." All things is not a theological problem to be solved. It's a biblical assertion to actually be believed.
And we would define sovereignty as it's defined in every dictionary. He's the king, and he has the right to rule however he pleases.
This definition quietly empties sovereignty of content. Of course, God has the right to rule, but how does he rule? Scripture doesn't leave that open-ended. It tells us plainly. Isaiah 46:10 says, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. God does not merely have the right to rule, his counsel stands. His pleasure is not hypothetical, it is accomplished.
But if he's pleased to give the earth over to man, as the scripture says, and to allow us to make choices that are real and sourced from us, not from his decree or from his determination.
Yeah, this is where Flowers' argument breaks decisively with Scripture. Yes, man is responsible. Yes, man chooses. But Scripture never says those choices exist outside of God's decree or governance. Proverbs 16:9 says, a man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. The text does not say the Lord merely permits the steps, he directs them. Acts 17:26 says, and hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. Human history, geography, and timing are not self-authored, they are determined.
And to allow us to make choices that are real and sourced from us, not from his decree or from his determination.
Scripture never opposes human agency to divine decree. That opposition is imported from philosophy, not exegesis, and that's something that Leighton doesn't do all that well either. The Bible affirms both without apology. James 1:13 says, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. Then in James 1:14 we read, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Man sins willingly, man desires sin, and yet Scripture elsewhere affirms God's exhaustive governance. These truths are not harmonized by denying decree, but by submitting to revelation.
Then he has every right to do that. So we actually have a higher view of sovereignty in the sense that we believe God could, if he wanted to, give us libertarian free will. And we believe that's exactly what he did according to what the scripture reveals about how he interacts with creation.
Actually, that's not a higher view of sovereignty. It's a speculation view. Scripture never defines God's sovereignty by what he could have done, but by what he has done and is doing. The Bible does not praise unrealized possibilities. It declares settled realities. Once again, Isaiah 46:10 does not say, I could do all my pleasure, but I will do all my pleasure. A sovereignty that must step back in order for freedom to exist is not sovereignty as Scripture presents it. It's sovereignty redefined to protect man's autonomy or man's free will.
Calvinist, on the other hand, believes that he's chosen to sovereignly rule a determined world, a world where he makes the choices about what people choose.
Actually, what Scripture teaches is stronger and more precise. God ordains whatsoever comes to pass, and man chooses according to his nature and his desires. The Bible never portrays God as reacting to autonomous decisions. That's ridiculous. It portrays him as accomplishing his will through real human actions without being the author of sin. This is not philosophical determinism, it actually is biblical providence. Daniel 4:35, which I read earlier, stands unanswered by libertarianism because it leaves no realm, heavenly or earthly, outside God's active will. Listen, in conclusion here, the real divide is not vocabulary, it is authority. One side, Calvinism, allows Scripture to define sovereignty even when it humbles human autonomy. The other side, Flowers' side, redefines sovereignty to preserve libertarian freedom even when Scripture never teaches it. Calvinism does not diminish responsibility, it magnifies God, and it refuses to call a God sovereign who merely hopes, reacts, or waits to see what man will decide. What kind of God is that? Sorry, Leighton, you are just wrong here. You are simply wrong, and you are wrong in so many of the attacks that you do on Calvinism, sovereign grace, the doctrines of grace. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it edified. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with others so they can know the truth about who God really is and what the Bible actually says. And if you have not subscribed to the channel as of yet, I would appreciate it. Click the notification bell as well to get updates when new videos like this one come out. So until next time, remember, true doctrine matters. God bless.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind.